I still remember the first time I saw him. It wasn't romantic, not at first. I was 56, standing in the community library, helping shelve the poetry section when he walked in. He had that restless energy of youth, headphones around his neck, hoodie slightly too big. Nothing about him screamed future husband, but everything about him stopped me. He asked me where the Neruda books were. Not Stephen King, not gaming magazines. Neruda. I smiled. You're too young to be looking for heartbreak already, he grinned. Aren't we all born into it? That was the first time someone younger than my own son made me feel seen. I didn't think much of it that day, but he came back, again and again. Sometimes for books. Sometimes I realized, for me. He'd sit near my desk, asking about literature, about life, about why I still wore my wedding ring, though I'd been divorced for years. And one day I took it off. When people saw us together first at the cafe, then at the farmer's market, they whispered. They stared. My friend Clara pulled me aside and said, "You're old enough to be his mother." I smiled because I already knew what they were going to say next. And they did. You're crazy. You're desperate. He's using you. They didn't know what it felt like to laugh again. To feel wanted, not for what I could give, but for who I was becoming around him. He didn't make me feel young. He made me feel alive. And when the whispers became shouts, when my sister stopped inviting me to dinners, when my daughter refused to introduce me to her fiancé, I had to ask myself, was I willing to lose everyone? To choose the one person who made me feel like someone? And I was, because love isn't defined by age, it's defined by courage. And this was the bravest thing I'd ever done. There was a night not long after the first real date we ever had. I was lying awake in my bed, staring at the ceiling fan, going in slow, mocking circles. My phone buzzed. It was a simple message from him. I miss you. But I didn't reply. Not because I didn't feel the same, but because that night all the voices of the world came crashing into my head. You're embarrassing yourself. He'll leave you once he's bored. You should be ashamed. Even my own reflection in the mirror looked back at me with doubt. The lines on my face, the gray in my hair, the softness of a body that had seen life and loss. I felt exposed, like I was clinging to something forbidden, something I had no right to touch. The next day, I met him at our usual spot by the park. I had made up my mind. I was going to tell him it was over, that it wasn't fair for him, that he needed someone who could give him all the things I couldn't. But before I could say a word, he reached into his bag and pulled out a tattered paperback. It was Rumi. He handed it to me, smiling gently. Page 73, he said. I opened it, and there underlined in pencil was this line. The minute I heard my first love story, I started looking for you. My hands trembled, and I cried. Right there, in the middle of the park, at 56 years old, in front of a 19-year-old who didn't laugh, didn't run, didn't question, he just held my hand and whispered, "You don't have to hide. Not from me." That was the moment I realized. He wasn't the one who needed convincing. I was. Not about him, but about my own worthiness to be loved without permission, without apology, without shame. It didn't take long for the backlash to go from whispers to war. It started small. My sister unfriended me on Facebook. A cousin left a sarcastic comment under a photo of us. Aren't you supposed to be babysitting him, not dating him? I laughed it off at first. But then the phone stopped ringing. Holiday invitations vanished. And my daughter? She said the words I never thought I'd hear from her. If you keep seeing him, I don't want you around my children. It crushed me. Not because I didn't expect judgment, but because I didn't realize how conditional love could be. Until it was mine being judged. She didn't see the way he brought me flowers from the same field every Thursday. She didn't see the way he sat beside me when my arthritis flared up, reading me poetry in that soft, unpolished voice that never once made me feel old. All she saw was numbers, age, time, a scandal, not a story. One afternoon, I found myself sitting alone on my front porch, staring at a life that used to feel full. My mailbox was empty, my phone silent, my world shrinking. And I asked myself a question that haunts every woman who's ever chosen love, that looks wrong from the outside. Is it worth losing everything to keep the one thing that feels real? That evening when he came by with takeout and that crooked smile, I looked at him longer than usual. He didn't ask questions. He just sat beside me, handed me a spring roll, and said, "You don't have to choose between love and dignity. You've already lived long enough to deserve both." And in that moment, I made a decision. If I had to lose my place at the family table, if I had to be the villain in their stories, I would still rather be loved truly than tolerated quietly. Because I finally understood. This wasn't a phase. It wasn't a rebellion. It was a revolution of the heart. I thought I had been through enough heartbreak for one lifetime. Divorce, estrangement from my daughter, friends who vanished the moment I stepped outside their idea of normal. But I wasn't prepared for this. One morning, while folding laundry in my tiny sunroom, I noticed his phone buzzing nonstop. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. The name on the screen was one I didn't recognize. The message: "You told me it was over. Why are you still with her?" My heart dropped. I read it again and again. And then I did the thing I promised myself I would never do. I opened his messages. There were more. Dozens. All from the same girl, young, beautiful, and heartbroken. My hands trembled. Had I been a fool? Had they all been right? When he walked through the door, I didn't even speak. I just held up his phone. The look on his face was not guilt. It was panic and sorrow. "I can explain," he said. But could he? Could anyone explain away something that felt like a knife to the gut? We sat in silence, and then he told me everything. She was his ex. They had broken up a year ago, but she refused to let go. And while he had never met her since we'd been together, he hadn't blocked her either. "I didn't want to hide you," he said. "I just didn't know how to tell her. I didn't want you to be dragged into the mess, but I already was, neck deep." And for the first time since falling in love with him, I questioned if love was enough. Was trust repairable? Could you ever fully give your soul to someone who had a door left slightly ajar for someone else? I told him I needed space. I packed a bag, and I left. But as I sat alone that night in a rented room with a single lamp and a heart full of doubt, I realized something bigger. The people I'd left behind had already called me a fool. But what if I let fear turn me into one? 3 days. That's how long I stayed away. 3 days of silence. No texts, no calls. Just the kind of quiet that feels like it's pressing on your chest. On the 4th morning, I returned home to water my plants, and there he was, sitting on my porch like a lost child, holding a small wooden box in his lap. He didn't speak right away. He just stood, his hands shaking slightly, and said, "Before you decide anything, please open this." I hesitated. Was it some kind of peace offering? An attempt to smooth things over with flowers and apologies? I didn't want forgiveness to come with conditions. But then I opened it. Inside there were old Polaroids. Dozens of them. Some blurry, some torn, but all carefully preserved. Each one was of me. Me laughing at a picnic. Me reading by the window. Me making that awful face I didn't know I made when I was deep in thought. He'd been taking them secretly, lovingly, capturing what I thought no one noticed. And beneath the stack of photos was a journal. His journal. Every page filled with handwritten entries, little notes of admiration, moments that meant everything to him. Fears about losing me. Dreams about a future where no one cared how old we were. Then near the end, one line made me gasp. "They see her as old, but I see the woman who made me believe in love again. I'd marry her tomorrow if she'd let me." My throat closed. Tears welled in my eyes. This wasn't a game to him. It wasn't rebellion or obsession. It was devotion, quiet, consistent, unshakable. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel ashamed of being loved. I looked at him. He looked terrified. And I said, "Okay, but if you ever make me cry like that again, I'll burn this journal." We both laughed. And then we cried together. That night, we didn't talk about weddings or drama or forgiveness. We just held each other. Not like a teenager and a senior, but like two souls that found their mirror. We thought we had passed the storm. That once we found peace between us, the world would soften. But oh, we were wrong. It started when someone posted a photo of us online, me in my gardening hat, him holding my hand. Nothing staged, nothing glamorous, just love. Within hours, it went viral. The comments, "Is this his grandmother or sugar mama? He's just waiting for the inheritance. This is disgusting. She should be ashamed." It was like being stripped bare in front of the entire world. Mocked, judged, reduced to a punchline. I cried in the bathtub that night, the water doing nothing to drown out the noise in my head. He sat outside the door for an hour, not saying a word. Then he slid a note under the crack. It said, "Let them laugh, let them assume. But when they fall asleep alone tonight, we'll still be here holding the only thing that's real." I stared at those words until the ink blurred through my tears. He was right, so we made a decision. We wouldn't hide, we wouldn't shrink. We would wear our love like armor. We posted photos, we shared our story. Not to prove anything, but to remind anyone out there who felt unworthy, too old, too late, that love doesn't check birth certificates. And slowly the comments began to change. One woman wrote, "I lost my husband 5 years ago and never believed I could love again. You gave me hope." Another said, "I judged at first. Then I realized I wish someone looked at me the way he looks at her." It wasn't easy. We still got laughed at. But now we were laughing too. Not at them, but at how far we'd come. Because when the world tried to humiliate us, we answered with something louder: joy. He had been acting strange for days, nervous, fidgety. Every time I looked up, he was either pacing or disappearing into some secret part of the house. I thought maybe the online cruelty had finally gotten to him. Maybe the weight of it all was sinking in. But then one crisp Sunday morning, he asked me to take a walk. The air was gentle. Autumn leaves swirled like confetti under our feet. And I could feel his heartbeat just by holding his hand. It was racing. We reached the old wooden bridge by the lake, the place we used to sit and throw pebbles into the water, like kids with no care in the world. That's when he dropped to one knee. I gasped. Not because I didn't expect it, but because I did. And I was terrified. I know people still don't get it, he said. They think this is a phase or a plan or a performance. But I don't care what they believe. I only care if you'll marry me. He held out a simple silver ring. Not flashy, not big, just real. My throat tightened. I didn't say yes, not immediately. I sat down on the bridge and looked out over the water. And then I said it something I'd been too afraid to admit, even to myself. What if I say yes and then I die in 10 years, or 5, or 2? What if I leave you alone? His reply was quiet, but it broke me. Then I will thank God every day for the years I got. 1 year with you is worth 50 with anyone else. I cried, he cried. And then I said yes. Not because I thought we had time, but because I finally realized time doesn't measure love. Later that night, we danced in the kitchen. No music, no phones, just us. And in that moment, I didn't feel 56 or 76 or 106. I just felt chosen, cherished, free. We kept it small. No grand cathedral, no fairy tale castle. Just a garden, a few chairs, a white dress that didn't try too hard, and a groom who looked at me like I was the only person who ever mattered. Most of my family didn't come. My daughter refused. My son never responded. My sister sent a message that said, I can't watch you throw your dignity away. But you know who did show up? His mother, his brother, his college roommate. Even his old literature professor who whispered, this is the most honest love I've ever witnessed. Just as the ceremony began, a woman I hadn't seen in years slipped into the last row. It was my sister. She wore sunglasses even though it was cloudy and sat with her arms folded. I braced myself. But then, as we were about to exchange vows, someone handed the officiant a sealed envelope. He looked at me hesitant and whispered, they asked me to read this before the vows. A hush fell over the garden. He opened the letter. It was from my daughter. I judged you. I called you names in my heart. But today, I realized, I'm not angry because you embarrassed us. I'm angry because you showed me something I didn't have the courage to believe in. You chose love even when it made no sense, even when it hurt. And that's something I wish I had done. Mom, I'm proud of you. If you'll have me, I want to come home. And I want to meet the man who taught you to live again. The entire garden went still. The only sound was me, sobbing. He squeezed my hand, I nodded, and we spoke our vows. Not promises to be perfect, not fantasies of forever, but a commitment to love fiercely and without shame for as long as we were gifted breath. When we kissed, I swear the wind itself applauded. And for the first time in decades, I felt like I wasn't just living. I was alive. We were 2 months into marriage. It was blissfully mundane. Groceries, laundry, laughing over burnt toast. We were learning each other's rhythms, and I thought, finally, no more surprises. Until I found the envelope. It was hidden under a stack of books in the study. Old, worn, addressed to him in thick, faded ink. I didn't mean to open it, but curiosity is cruel like that. Inside was a letter from a woman. Young, desperate, heartbroken. You left without saying goodbye. I thought what we had was real. You told me I was your future. Was I just practice? My hands trembled. I read it again, and again, each line cutting deeper than the last. He had never mentioned anyone before me, not a name, not a past. So why now? That night, I didn't confront him right away. I waited until the dishes were done, until he sat down on the couch with that look, the one that used to melt me. Then I placed the envelope in his lap. Silence. He didn't flinch. He didn't grab for excuses. He just looked at it, then looked at me and whispered, I thought if I told you, you'd think I came to you as a rebound. But I didn't. I came to you because I realized what real love should feel like. And I didn't want to ruin that with old mistakes. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, but I felt something strange. Not betrayal, not rage, but fear. Fear that I was just another chapter. Fear that I had been his escape, not his destination. I walked out that night, not far, just enough to breathe. I sat on the porch swing in my nightgown, watching stars that didn't care about my heartbreak. And then the door opened. He walked out barefoot, knelt beside me and said, "I didn't choose you because I was broken. I chose you because with you, I felt whole for the first time. But if you need space to believe that I'll wait, even if it takes a lifetime." In that moment, I realized something. Love isn't about being someone's first. It's about being their last true choice. And I was his. And from that moment on, I stopped apologizing for choosing happiness. It started like any other morning. He brought me coffee in bed, 2 sugars, no cream. I teased him about his wild hair. He kissed my forehead and said, "You make gray look like gold." We laughed, and then he dropped the mug. Porcelain shattered on the floor. His body trembled, and before I could scream, he collapsed. The ambulance came fast, but time felt slower than grief. They asked me questions I couldn't answer. Next of kin, does he have allergies? What's his blood type? I was his wife, but in that moment, I felt like a stranger. At the hospital, the world turned white. White walls, white coats, white sheets. His face pale but peaceful. They called it arrhythmia, a hidden condition, rare, unpredictable. He needs a pacemaker, the doctor said, and he'll need monitoring for the rest of his life. They turned to me, "Are you ready for that kind of care?" That night, I sat alone in the hospital room watching him sleep. His fingers twitched, his chest rose and fell like a gentle tide. I thought I was the fragile one, the old woman clinging to youth. But now, he was the one whose future felt uncertain. When he woke up, his voice cracked. He tried to smile. "Guess I'm the old man now." We both chuckled, but behind his joke was fear. Fear that I'd walk away now. So I cupped his face, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "I didn't marry you to feel young. I married you to feel alive. And nothing, not your heart, not your age, will change that. Love doesn't protect us from pain. It walks with us through it. And in that moment, I chose to walk beside him, no matter how uneven the road might become." You'd think nearly losing someone would put things into perspective. That it would silence the judgment, calm the chaos, soften hearts. But no, sometimes when people see your light survive the darkest storms, they don't applaud. They try to steal it. It started with a phone call. His older brother, who hadn't spoken to him in years, suddenly wanted to check in. Then came the cousin who once mocked me at our wedding, now asking for a small loan. And worst of all, my own daughter, the one who said I had embarrassed the family, tainted my legacy, thrown away dignity for a man half my age. She showed up at my door with red eyes and rehearsed sorrow. "Mom, I didn't know he was really sick." I wanted to believe her, to embrace her, to forget everything. But then she said it, "You're going to leave everything to him, aren't you?" And there it was, not love, not regret, just calculation. We sat at the kitchen table. I looked at the hands that once held mine as a child, now clenched tight with entitlement. And I told her, "I raised you to love people, not profit from them." She scoffed, "You're being manipulated. One hospital stay, and now you think it's destiny." I stood. No, it was destiny the moment he stayed, when everyone else walked out. Later that night, he held me. I hadn't told him what she said, but maybe he felt it in my silence. He whispered, "I don't want your money. I want your time, your smile, your stubborn morning breath. If you left me nothing but your story, I'd still be the richest man alive." I wept, not because I was sad, but because I realized love doesn't need approval. It just needs 2 hearts willing to stand against the world. And it was a week after he came home from the hospital. I was doing laundry, folding shirts, matching socks, smoothing out creases, when a piece of paper slipped from the inside pocket of his favorite hoodie. A worn, folded letter. No envelope. Just his handwriting and one word at the top. I sat down, my hands trembling. I knew I shouldn't read it. But something told me. It wasn't a secret. It was a message waiting. If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it. And if I didn't, please, don't let anyone say I wasted my life. Because loving you truly, fully, without apology was the only thing that ever felt like living. You taught me that love isn't about youth or plans or years ahead. It's about now, about showing up, about laughing until your ribs hurt and crying without shame. I know the world looked at us like a scandal, but what they saw as absurd, I saw as divine. If I'm gone, don't remember the arguments. Remember how you made me tea even when you were tired. Remember how I'd kiss your wrist before you slept. Remember that your love saved a man who didn't believe he was worthy of it. By the end, my tears had smudged the ink, but the words were burned into me. When he came home that evening, I was in the kitchen holding the letter. He froze, then said softly, You weren't supposed to see that." I walked to him, held his face, and whispered. But I needed to, because in that moment, I saw not just a man, but a soul who had feared being forgotten, who had planned for loss before fully receiving love. And now, I was more certain than ever. I would never let him forget, not the depth, not the weight, not the miracle of what we found. One crisp Sunday morning, while we were sipping tea under the oak tree in our backyard, his phone rang. He rarely answered unknown numbers, but this time he did. His face fell almost instantly, eyes darting, voice shrinking. When he hung up, he just said, "It's my mother, she needs me." I hadn't heard him talk about her in over 2 years. She was one of the fiercest critics of our love, the one who called me a delusion, a phase, a mistake he'd regret. But now, she was sick, very sick. The days after that call were full of silence. He started packing bags. I didn't stop him. I couldn't. How could I compete with a mother's need? Still in my chest, a war between understanding and aching. Then came the moment that shattered me. He sat beside me, eyes wet but steady. She asked me to move back, to take care of her, and to leave you. I blinked, not breathing. She said she won't accept our marriage. She said it's either her or you. I wanted to scream, to rage. Instead, I asked one question. "What do you want?" He broke. Tears spilled. His voice cracked. "I want peace, but I don't know if that's with her or here." That night he left. Said he needed time. Said he loved me. But the house felt colder than it ever had. 3 days passed. Then, one evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, I found a note on the porch, scrawled messy raw. I went back to her. Not to leave you, but to say goodbye. You are my family now. And if she can't love us both, then I choose the one who already does. When he walked through the door hours later, I didn't speak. Just wrapped my arms around him. We stood there, no words, just breath, and let love win again. Because sometimes the greatest rebellion isn't choosing between love and family. It's choosing the family you create over the one that couldn't accept you. 1 year after that moment of choosing, he surprised me with something I never expected. Not diamonds, not a vacation, but a simple invitation card. Cream-colored, handwritten. Let's do it again. This time in front of everyone. Not for them, for us. I looked up, stunned. You want to renew our vows. He smiled, that mischievous, boyish grin that still melted my knees. This time not in secret. This time no courthouse. This time in the field where we first kissed. That field was nothing fancy, just an open stretch near the train tracks. But to us, it was sacred. It was where he whispered, "I love you," between nervous laughs and trembling hands. Where I said, "Don't joke like that," then kissed him to make sure he meant it. So we gathered a few close friends, a justice of the peace, and the soft hum of evening wind. I wore a white shawl. He wore a tie I'd gifted him on our first Christmas. We stood under the open sky. Older, bolder, but still fragile in the ways only real love exposes. As we exchanged vows again, his voice cracked. You weren't the beginning I imagined, but you are the only ending I want. My heart shattered open. When it was my turn, I whispered, "You called me crazy, now I call you mine." Laughter, tears, applause. But what I didn't notice until the photos came back was the figure standing at the edge of the crowd. A woman, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. His mother. She didn't say a word, didn't approach, didn't clap, but she came. And that was enough for now. Because the fiercest protests sometimes soften in silence. Because witnessing love, undeniable and raw, can undo even the harshest judgment. We didn't speak about it that night. We just danced, under stars, in our little nowhere field. Like two souls who had finally come home,